In this video tutorial, I'm going to talk about Office scripts versus VBA. What is a macro? Macros are written in Visual Basic for applications, usually known as VBA. These macros run on Office desktop apps and do not support the web technology. Office scripts are written in TypeScript that is built on JavaScript. So anybody who is familiar with JavaScript will be able to record a script or modify or customize or write a script from scratch with ease. Office scripts run on Office for the web. So Office scripts are actually macros for the web or for Microsoft Teams, as Teams uses Office Online. Why use macros? As quite frequently you will want to automate a task or perform a more complex arithmetic operation, you will need to record a macro. When it comes to automation or stepping through parts of your data, you will have to use a loop. There are 4 types of loops. The first one is the most common one, the for loop, or the for next loop. Typically it uses a variable called a counter or an index to keep track of how many times the loop has been executed, and it stops when the counter reaches a certain number. It is made up of 3 parts. The first one is the initial expression that assigns an initial value to the counter. The second one is the condition of the loop that is to be true to keep the loop running. And the third one is the so-called increment expression that is to increment the counter. Let's take an example. Algorithm summing up, input n, x is equal to 0. Loop, I is equal to n. This is the initial expression. So we assign a value which is n to the counter, to the index. Then comes the condition, as long as I is greater than 0. That's the condition. That is to be true to keep the loop running. And the third part is the increment expression, which is in this case step minus 1. In other words, I is equal to I minus 1. This is the core of the loop. X is equal to x plus I, end of the loop, output x, the end. This algorithm adds the number from 1 to a certain number specified by the user. The next type is the for each loop. It's a special kind of for next loop that allows you to loop through each element within a collection. The next one is the while loop. It doesn't necessarily use a variable to count. Instead, it keeps running as long as a condition is true. This means that if the condition starts out as false, the conditional statement won't be executed at all. let's see the previous algorithm with a while loop. In this case, the condition is tested before the conditional statement is carried out. Input n, x is equal to 0, while n is greater than 0, x is equal to x plus n is equal to n minus 1, end of the loop, output x, the end. So this algorithm adds the numbers from 1 to a certain number specified by the user. The do-while loop. The only one difference between a do-while and a while loop is that the condition is tested at the end of the loop rather than the beginning. This means that the conditional statement will be at least once executed. So, input n, we ask the user to give us a number. X is equal to 0. Do x is equal to x plus n is equal to n minus 1, while n is greater than 0. This is the end of the loop, output x, the end. So now let's take an example. Let's assign a new assignment. Let's call it Office Scripts. Let's attach a workbook from our OneDrive. When you attach any document, make sure you click on this ellipsis and choose Students added their own copy. That's very important. It is also recommended to check assign to all students added to this class in the future. And you can set the deadline. Let it be today, 8 p.m. and close date tomorrow, 8 p.m. Done. And assign. Okay, let's look at the student's view. So this is the student's view. Let's click the workbook. Go to the Automate tab. Choose Editing. So let's create a new script from scratch. You can rename your script. Let's rename it For Next Loop. First of all, we have to create a new variable. A variable is a container used for storing data, and the content of it may vary, hence the name. We can use the keywords let or var to declare a new variable. The difference between let and var is that if you use var, it defines a variable globally, whereas if you use let, it defines a variable that is limited to the block in which it is declared. So in this case we are going to use let, choose a name, for example worksheet, and we are going to assign a value to our new variable workbook dot, and we can so we have this property called workbook, and we can use the dot notation to add any other properties or methods. A method is also an object property that is happen to be a function. There is a method called getActiveWorksheet. So now we have assigned the active worksheet to a variable called worksheet. So now we can use our variable, a new variable, and we are going to create another variable. Let's call it n. So if you have a look at our pseudocode, let's go back. For next. So we need another variable called n and x. So let n, and let's assign worksheet dot get range. We have a method called get range. Let it be A1, this cell A1, get the value, and we also have to define the data type as number. Let x so we have assigned we have declared 3 variables, worksheet, n and x, and we have assigned a value to each of our new variables. So now let's go on. Next step, now comes the loop. So we are going to use the for loop. For let I, this is the initial expression, remember? That is to assign a value to the counter or the index. That is why we use I as an abbreviation. It's an abbreviation for index, for the counter. So the initial value is going to be the number the user type in cell A1. So the initial value is going to be n. The next part is the condition, as long as I is greater than 0, and the third part is the increment expression, which is going to be step minus 1, which means that I should be equal to I minus 1. You can abbreviate it like this. Next step, x equals x plus I, so x is equal to x plus I, x plus I. You can also use an abbreviation for this. So this is actually x is equal to x plus I. This is also a sort of abbreviation, like this one. And now let's use range A2, cell A2, to set the value. So worksheet, we have this variable, worksheet, get range A2, and let's set the value x. Let's save our script. Now let's give a number 4. Let's run the script. 10. It works just fine because 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is equal to 10. Now let's do this with the while loop as well. Remember, the while loop, it doesn't necessarily use a variable to count. Instead, it keeps running as long as a condition is true. This means that if the condition starts out as false, the conditional statement won't be executed at all. It is because the condition is tested before the conditional statement is executed, is carried out. So now we are going to use the while loop. Let's comment out this section. So while, we are going to use the while keyword. While n is greater than 0, x is equal to x plus n. And n should be equal to n minus 1. Let's save and let's test. It works. Now let's see the for each loop. So it's a special kind of for next loop that allows you to loop through each element within a collection. Okay, for example, how could we we have 4 worksheets, sheet 1, sheet 2 and sheet 3. So how could we write a number in cell A1 of each of our worksheets? So let's create a new script from scratch. Let's rename it to for each loop. Okay. Workbook, we have this property called workbook, and we have a method called get worksheets. For each sheet get range A1, and let's set the value for each loop. Okay, let's save this and let's run. Okay, so we have for each loop in cell A1, also in worksheet 2 and in worksheet 3. Thank you for watching.